Today we're going to build an Angry Birds-like game. I just call it Bad Birds. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to create an empty project. Now this one we're going to use a few different things on the layout size. So let's go ahead and set our layout size to about 1800 by 480. And then let's also set our window size to 720 by 480. And then we're going to change one more setting that we haven't changed before. This one right here that says full screen in browser. Let's turn that off, and that gives us a smaller window to kind of look at our game. It just gives it a little bit of a different effect than what we've used before. So we'll go ahead and get started with those settings. One of the other things that we're going to do on this game is we're going to create multiple layers. Some of the games that we've done in the past had a little bit of layers in them, but this will be the first one where we actually do some specific work from the beginning and create some multiple layers. So on the Layers tab, and if you don't have it, you may need to come up here to View and then check Layer Bar. But it should show up over here next to your projects. So let's rename this one, and we'll call the layout 0 background. And then we're going to add another layer, and we're going to name that one Main. Now it's important that their order is exactly like this. Background on the bottom, 0, and Main on the top, number 1. If yours are wrong, just click and drag them until they're actually that order. Now let's make sure we have background selected. And when this is selected, that means anything we do here is going to get added to the background layer. I'll show you in a minute how you can move things from one layer to the next after they've been created, but make sure you're on the background layer. And then let's go ahead and insert our background. And we're just going to go ahead and use a sprite. And you can use whichever background you want, but the one I provided here with today's lesson fits nicely with our background. So again, don't use the tiled background, just use the regular sprite. And I'm going to zoom out, and we'll see this just fits in here, and it needs to be stretched just a little bit, but this image stretches very, very well. So I'm going to adjust mine so that it's about like that. Now that we have our background image, let's go ahead and rename this background so that we know where it's at. We're only going to have a few sprites on this game, but it's still a good idea to name them. Now, if you happen to accidentally put this on the main and you want to move it, right here in the Properties bar is the Layer tab, and this will allow you to move an object from one layer to the next. So right here, I just set it to main, and now I've got it back on the background. So if you get an object and it's on the wrong layer, here's how you can move that. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to add a ground sprite. So we've done this in a few other games too. So let's go ahead and create a sprite, and we're going to put it on the background layer as well. And we're just going to shade it. I'm going to make mine green since the ground is green. And then I'm going to go ahead and just line it up here about where the ground is and stretch it throughout the entire game. And then we're going to make this invisible at runtime. So let's go ahead and just set that invisibility to invisible. Okay, so let's go ahead and rename this to ground. And then let's add the physics property. And the reason we're going to use the physics property is we want the cannonball to interact with it in bounce. And that's the only way to do it is if they're both physics. So let's go ahead and add physics. And then because we don't want this to fall, because if you remember, the physics property will have things fall by default, we're going to go ahead and set its movability to yes, so that it can't be moved. We're going to use the mouse in order to target with our cannon. So let's go ahead and add the mouse behavior, or the mouse object, so that we can use the mouse features. Now we're done with the background layer. So let's go ahead and lock the background layer so we don't accidentally move it again. The way we lock the layers is just click this little tiny padlock, and you'll see it goes from the unlocked state to the locked state. When it's in the locked state, if you click on any of the objects that are on that layer, you'll see you can't move them and you can't select them. And then we want to set the main as the main layer. So we'll just go ahead as the active layer, sorry. So now we'll just click main, and now that becomes the active layer. And anything we add will now be on the main layer. Now, if you happen to lock your background, but you want to do something with one of your objects that are on your background, you can actually click them here and adjust their properties, but yet they're still locked. You still can't move them. Let's go ahead and add our cannon. So I've provided a sprite that we can use as our cannon. If you want to use something different, you sure can. But I'm going to use this thing right here. It's kind of a little springboard of some sort here, and I just have it horizontal. Now make sure that the cannon is pointing the right direction. So if you load your own cannon in, make sure it's actually horizontal here, and you may need to rotate it. But it's important that the angle stays 0 for our cannon, otherwise the mouse movement isn't going to work. Now you can stretch yours out a little bit and then just set it wherever you'd like. Now keep in mind this ground is not going to show up, but it is going to be our ground. So I'm going to line mine up right about here. Then let's go ahead and rename this to cannon so that we can find it later. All right, now let's go to the event sheet. And what we're going to add now is we're going to add the ability for that cannon to track with the mouse. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a system behavior, and we're going to add the every tick. And what we're going to do is every tick of the game, we're going to adjust the cannon so that it's pointing wherever the mouse is pointing. And so the way we're going to do that is on the every tick, we're going to add an action, and we're going to say cannon, and we're going to say rotate towards position. So it's right here. And then the degrees is 10. And then our position, we're going to use mouse.y or x for x, and mouse.y for y, and then click done. Let's go ahead and test that, and you can see that it actually will track the mouse now. Okay, so now you can see it tracks the mouse, but if we go all the way around, it'll actually do circles, which isn't exactly what we want to do. So we'll fix that here in a second. So now let's go ahead and set it up so that the cannon can't rotate a full 360 degrees. We'll just have it track about the directions that we want it to be. So to do that, we're going to add a couple more conditions to this every tick. So go ahead and right click just to the left of this gear, say add another condition. And that condition is we're going to compare two values. So click system and then compare two values. And we're going to compare mouse dot x, and we're going to say if that's greater than about 140, and we may need to adjust these values, but we'll just go ahead and start with 140. And then we're going to add a second one, so right click, add condition, and we're going to do the same thing, system, compare two values, and we're going to say mouse.y, and we're going to set that one to less than or equal to 330. Now these values are what the mouse position is on the screen. So we just set it in this quadrant right here. So if the mouse is greater than 140 on the X, which is the left and the right, so that's somewhere around here. You can see down in the lower right hand corner what your mouse coordinates are. And then we set the Y to 330, which is about, well, it's also about right here. So it's about right here. So as long as the mouse is between in this quadrant here, it will track that. Otherwise, if it's too low or too far to the right, it just ignores it. So we can go ahead and test that. So now you can see we kind of point to the ground, we can point up, but we can't go too far over. Now if yours isn't quite right, you can go ahead and adjust those two X and Y values until they're just the way you want them. Now you'll also notice that our cannon is pivoting in at the very, very center of the cannon. And it kind of looks goofy because it looks like it's got like a pin in the middle. So we'll go ahead and fix that here in a second. Let's go ahead and fix the way the cannon pivots. If you remember from earlier, there's this thing called the image point, which is right here in the middle. And this causes the cannon to rotate around that image point. What we want to do is we want to move that image point back so that when it rotates, it kind of rotates from the back side. So to do that, we'll go ahead and edit our Canon. We'll click the image point editor, and we're going to go ahead and move this origin point, and we're going to move it towards the back of the Canon. So right about there. So now when we rotate the mouse, you'll see that the Canon actually pivots more towards the back, like what you would expect. All right, now since it's rotating there, I'm going to move my Canon back just a little bit because it's a little too far forward now. And then I'm also going to probably drop it a little bit to be right about there. You can adjust yours as well. Now we're going to go ahead and add the ammo, and the ammo that I used was a piece of poo. You can use any ammo that you want. I've provided this one ammo here, so we're just going to go ahead and load that. We'll close that, and make sure you put it at the bottom of the screen underneath your layout. That's going to be important later. Now we're going to also resize this, and I'm just going to move it here to check because I want it to be smaller than my Canon so that it actually can come out of the Canon. But once I've got it the size I want, I'm going to set it right here at the bottom. We're going to add two behaviors to the Canon. The first behavior is going to be physics so that we can actually interact with it, and it bounces off of the ground and it falls when it gets shot in the air. The second is we're going to use the scroll 2. Now we've used that before, and what the scroll 2 does is it allows the camera to actually follow that ammo as it gets shot across the screen. One more thing that we'll do is we'll go ahead and rename this to ammo so that we can find it later. We're going to add one more image point, and that's the image point of where we want the Canon ball or our ammo to actually spawn. So let's go ahead and edit our Canon. Now we moved this origin a minute ago. What we're going to do now is we're going to add another image point, and we're going to move that image point towards the front. And this is going to be where we spawn our ammo. So we should have two image points, the origin and then image point 1. Then we can go ahead and close this. Now let's go ahead and set it up so that we can shoot our cannonball or our ammo out of our Canon. So on the event sheet, we're going to add another event. We're going to use mouse, and we're going to say on click. And it doesn't matter, we're not going to click an object like we have used in the past. This is just going to be any click, any left mouse click. So we're just going to use the on clicked. We're going to say left, and then we're going to say click. And we're going to click done. Now what we're going to do for an action here is we're going to spawn that cannonball. So we're going to say cannon, and then we're going to do spawn another object, and the object is going to be our ammo, and we want to spawn this on the main layer. So in the past we've only had one layer, so it hasn't mattered. But now that we have multiple layers, we've got a background and a main layer, make sure you put it on the main layer. And then the second thing is that we want it to spawn on that image point we just created. So change this 0 to 1. And so now we're going to say spawn this ammo on the main layer at image point 1. Now once we spawn that, it's actually not going to do anything because it's just going to fall on the ground. So a couple things that we're going to do. The first thing is we're going to move that to the bottom of the layout. Because we don't want it to be spawned in front of our Canon. So let's go ahead and say move to bottom. Now we want to add a force to that Canon ball or that ammo so that it actually shoots across the screen. So let's say ammo, and then we're gonna use this one that says apply force at angle. Let's see, apply force at angle. All right, so it's right here. And that force is going to be, I'm just going to try 1500. We may need to adjust that. And then the angle is actually going to be our Canon dot angle. And that's the angle in which the Canon is pointing right now. And remember, our Canon is always changing based on our mouse. And then the next thing that we're going to do is just the image point. We want to put that to 1, although we've actually not defined 1 yet. All right, let's go ahead and test this. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and click the mouse button and we'll see what happens. Oops, I clicked it twice. All right, now you see the camera actually didn't follow very well. The reason the camera didn't fall very well is because we've got multiple cannonballs or ammos on the page right now. Well, there's one below the screen, and then we've got those two that accidentally shot out. So the camera's trying to adjust for that. But since there's two, it doesn't know which one to follow. So I can actually continue to click this button, and you'll actually see them kind of shoot across the screen. So we'll go ahead and fix that so that it only has one ammo so that it knows how to follow. We're going to add another event, and we're going to say ammo, and we're going to say there's a property in here called is sleeping. Now with the physics, there's when an object comes to rest and is not moving, it's called sleeping. And then when it does that, and there's a slight delay from when this actually gets triggered, that's when the system, we can then pick it up and say, okay, that's no longer moving. It's just lying on the ground in our case. So we're going to pick up on that. And then we're going to do one more thing, which is we're going to add another condition, and we're going to say compare y. And we're going to say if the y is greater than, we'll say 500 because our height is 480, so that's off the screen. So now it's going to say if it's sleeping and if it's greater than 500, we're going to do something. So this will be if it's not moving, and this is if it falls off the screen. But we don't want this to be an and, so let's go ahead and change that to an or. Just right click and say make or block. So when this is true, we want to do we're going to do something, and that something is we're going to destroy our ammo. So we're just going to go ahead and say destroy. Now we want to reset the cannon because we want to be able to move the camera back to the cannon. So we're going to destroy this, but we're going to wait 1 second before we move the cannon. So let's do system, wait, and then we'll say 1 second. And then to get the cannon or the screen, the camera to scroll back to the cannon, what we do is we do system, and there's one called scroll to object, and then we're just going to go ahead and pick our cannon. So this will now move the camera back to our cannon. Let's go ahead and test this and see if that works. Okay, so I'm going to fire. There we go. Now you see the camera followed that very, very well. And then you saw the the ammo went off the side of the screen and it fell and eventually got down to 500, and then it reset back to my cannon. So I'll fire again. Now you can see it's working perfect, and then it's resetting. Now one thing you might notice, if I quickly click the mouse button, we'll spawn a whole bunch of them, and you see the camera kind of jerks back and forth trying to follow them. So we'll go ahead and fix that so that we can just shoot one at a time. It's actually really easy to set it up so that you can only fire once. We're going to go ahead and just add another condition to this on left mouse clicked, and that condition is going to be system, and we're going to say compare two values. And we've done this on a few other games, but we're going to say ammo.count. And what count is the number of those objects that exist right now. So we're just going to say this will only get triggered if count equals 0, which means there are no other ammos on the screen. So we'll go ahead and test that and make sure that we can only shoot once. All right, so we'll see if we can just shoot once. All right, I'm clicking, and it only shoots once. It'll reset. We'll try it again. So that's working pretty good. Now, why don't we add something to shoot at? We'll create like a little set of blocks with a prize on top that you've got to knock down, kind of like the original Angry Birds. So we'll go ahead and go back to the layout. Make sure we're still on the main layer. I mean, you should be, but you might want to just double check. Now you'll notice when we insert a sprite, you'll notice there's a little tooltip there that says main. That's just reminding you what layer the object is being placed on. So when you do have multiple layers, you'll have some kind of a feedback. So we'll go ahead and add a block. And this is actually kind of large. Let's just go ahead and scale this down to say like 250 and 100. And then we'll go ahead and just move this over to the far right. Let's go ahead and rename this, and we'll just tweak it a little bit so that it's a little bit more of something we can build on. So let's go ahead and rename this block. Now what we'll do is we'll create just a small kind of series of blocks that are kind of standing on top of each other, kind of a structure to knock down. And you can create yours however you'd like. I'm just going to go ahead and make mine pretty simple. One thing we'll need to double check on this is just those collision points. Because this sprite has some rounded corners, the collision points might be off a little bit. So if we come in here and you look, what'll happen is this won't actually stand up, it'll actually fall down before we even launch. So because we don't really care about it, let's just go ahead and make it perfectly square. That way it'll stand very, very easily. So go ahead and adjust your collision points. We want this to interact with our ammo as well. So let's go ahead and add physics to our blocks. Now we need a prize to knock down. Let's go ahead and add another sprite, and we're just going to put it on top here. Now I've got this star. You could use something different if you want. We'll go ahead and load this. You've probably got the collision points up as well if you're following along. We'll just go ahead and tweak this a little bit so that it sits flat. We don't want it to immediately topple over. And if you want to delete one of these collision points, you can just right click and say delete. So we'll just go ahead and set it up about like that. And then I'm going to make mine just a little bit smaller, and we'll put it right here on top. We'll go ahead and rename this prize. And then if you want, you could actually put multiple prizes as well. The original Angry Birds had a bunch of things that you had to knock the towers down and then knock the pigs down. So you could build something like that as well. And mine's a little bit large. You could build yours a little bit smaller if you wanted. The other thing we want to do is we want to add physics to our prize so that it actually falls and interacts with our ammo as well. So let's go ahead and add physics. Now, we don't have any events for this yet, but we can go ahead and test it, and you'll be able to shoot that and knock it down with your ammo. There won't be any logic to what happens. Whoops, didn't hit it hard enough. So there you can see we can knock things down. Mine's a little bit too solid. There we go. But you'll see it'll fall down. And we may need to adjust the timeout on our ammo as well before it resets. But there you go. We've kind of got that set up now. We can go ahead and add some events for when you actually knock the prize on the ground. Let's add an explosion with some particles that we can have spawn when our prize hits the ground. So let's go ahead and add particles. There is an explosion image, so we'll go ahead and add that. And then let's go ahead and rename this to explosion. Now we need to set the parameters for the particles because they always come in a little bit different than what we want. So let's go ahead and come in and change this from continuous spray to one shot, and let's set our cones to 360 degrees so that it spawns in all directions. Now what we'll do is we'll go ahead and add an event. When the prize collides with the ground, we'll have it explode. So we'll go ahead and say add, and we'll say prize on collision with another object, and we're going to use ground. And then for that, our action will be prize. We'll spawn another object, and we'll spawn the particles. And we want to make sure we put that on the main layer. Again, since we've got multiple layers, we don't want it to be spawning on the background layer. So let's go ahead and say main. Then we'll go ahead and destroy our prize because we're done with that because it's going to explode. And then for right now, what we'll do is we'll wait 3 seconds so that the user can see that it exploded. And then we're just going to do, for now, we're just going to do restart layout. So we're not going to have a second level. We're just going to start the game over again. So we'll change this later, but for right now, we'll just do restart layout. Let's give that a test and see if it works. All right, so now I've got 2 prizes, so only one of them needs to hit the ground to restart the layout. So if you want to do something with multiples, we'll have to just tweak that logic so that when both of them have been destroyed, not just one. Now you'll notice my structure is a little bit hard to knock down. The reason is just because of the force. Now there's a couple things we can do. We can make our ammo larger, we can give it more force, we could make our tower here a little bit easier to knock down. We could add some additional mass to my ammo. So there's a lot of ways to kind of make this a little bit easier. And yours may vary as well depending on how big your blocks are. So there you have it. That's kind of the complete game. Very simple setup. We're going to go ahead and expand on this in the next couple of weeks. But this is the initial base of the game. Once you get this far, we'll go ahead and add some additional levels. We might add some tricky things to it. We'll probably set up a score to keep track of how many times you've knocked down the prizes and those types of things. So if you got any other ideas, let me know.